So, welcome to the show, Tom.
Hi, Sarah. Pleasure to be here.
I am so excited to have you here because, when I was doing my research for the show and looking into the problems that you guys are solving at SourceDay, it was taking me all the way back to my days of working in logistics, with thousands of emails and spreadsheets and business cards. And then when I saw that you actually say that optimizing supplier performance requires more than email, I thought, oh my goodness, yes, this is music to my ears. So I cannot wait to hear more about how you guys are transforming these day to day business relationships. So let's dive in so we don't leave everyone in suspense, shall we? Um, but but before we talk about the business and the great work that you're doing now, can you give us an insight into how and why SourceDay was founded? Because I find that so many great innovations seem to be born from this place of frustration and this feeling of there must be a better way. And I don't think you guys are any exception to that.
Absolutely, and appreciate the question. And so I wouldn't be here today without my co-founder, Clint McCree. He spent 10 years as a GM of a manufacturer here in Texas that was a discrete manufacturer for oil and gas, making electronic components. They ran an ERP system like most manufacturing organizations. They had great planning and scheduling. The number one thing that was continuously killing them day in and day out was their suppliers' inability to communicate or collaborate or share in real time, the misses that were inevitably going to happen, right? Parts were
Right.
just going to miss at some point, whether you can control it or not. But every week he would have a meeting just to try and see what can we build this week, what can we get out the door this week, and it's always dependent upon what parts are expected to show up, what parts have showed up, and what parts do we hope are going to show up. So it was that genesis and that experience for 10 years that he built the kind of roadmap for what could be a better way with a platform and a solution. And my background is from enterprise software. I also have a degree in supply chain and logistics. And came together with Clint. Happened to meet working at an enterprise software company and brought my experience from my first startup company that I was with to his vision for SourceDay, and short overnight success of 2.5 years of developing and building the platform on nights and weekends and long days, iterating and restarting over and over again. We finally launched the SourceDay platform in mid 2015.
Amazing. I'm glad that you told us that story because a lot of people think that, companies are an overnight success. And you're like, well, it was an overnight success of really long days, nights and weekends, and at least 3 years, but also starting and restarting again and again and again to make sure that you got it right and you created a product market fit, right? So, how did you come up with the name? Just curious.
That's a good one. We had a name originally that will go unnamed for now. Maybe a trivia question for people later on.
Okay.
But the source day name came from we're really long term have the opportunity to have a two-sided marketplace, right, for sourcing and optimizing of sourcing, but primarily as it relates to direct materials, right? There's a huge market with P2P and indirect sourcing. There's a very underserved market around direct materials and direct material collaboration. So one of the things that happens in every manufacturer, direct to consumer, retailer, anyone that has any product at all that they're shipping is they're continually sourcing and working with suppliers that are outside of their four walls. And they're doing that every day. So that kind of came to the end result of SourceDay, which was not readily available. We actually had to buy the web domain from someone in a law firm here in the United States, and we were
Nice.
able to procure it on our shoestring budget and capture the name.
And you talked them down, and here we are today with the source day name. I love it. I love it. So, as I mentioned in the intro, I've experienced many similar things in my career. So I really want to I really understand where you guys are coming from, but I want to know exactly what you do. So what exactly does source day do and how does it help your customers?
Great question, and thank you, Sarah. So, SourceDay is really a piece of platform that lives between the ERPs and bridges the gap between those buyers and the manufacturing side with those suppliers that live outside their four walls, like I mentioned earlier. We're ERP agnostic, and what we're doing is making easy for buyers to manage the changes that are inevitably happening throughout the life cycle of a purchase order, driving accountability to those suppliers and to the buyers in real time, and really just bubbling up the exceptions that are going to happen through the life cycle of a purchase order. Those pieces and parts that are either going to be shipped too early or too few or too late, or canceled altogether. That constant change is really the only constant in the supply chain. And SourceDay helps bridge that gap again from the big investment you've made in the ERP systems to connecting with your suppliers and giving them visibility to achieve and beat your goals at the highest possible solution possible, right? Giving them the best ability to have the performance that they need to have. So we've given 10,000 plus organizations the ability to connect in real time as purchase order demand is changing, enabling them both to, give their end customers a better experience, delivering parts on time at the lowest cost to their end users.
Wow, and I can only imagine how needed Source Day has been over the last 18 months. And I think we're going to get into this a little bit later on in the discussion, but I just wanted to say that because with everything that's going on right now, I mean, it's just crazy. And so I want to talk a bit about the number of products and a couple of services that you have, because I think you have quite a few products and services that are really, really helping your customers right now. So, can you give us a bit of a detail on each of those, what they do, who they're for, and how they all come together?
Absolutely. So SourceDay is a platform. We do have a series of modules. What I like to, really start this answer with is when you look at an organization, most companies have spent tens of millions or more on automating sales processes, e-commerce,
Right.
ensuring that they can get, more revenue in faster, right? How can I
Mhm.
sell more of my widget faster and automate more of that process? That's all well and good, but the problem that you've left unanswered is how do you deliver those promises to your customers at the lowest cost and the highest quality possible? So I like to think of the buyers and the organizations that are buying parts and materials and finished goods for that customer product result are the unsung heroes of any product organization, and they have ultimately been left to live in Excel and email, in some cases still fax. We see a lot of post-it notes and just a tremendous amount of manual processes. And when you're working with hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of purchase order lines, it's completely impossible to think that any number of humans can keep up with that volume of change or velocity. So SourceDay was created with the idea of how do we give procurement, the buying organization, specific for direct materials, a platform or a set of solutions that they can use outside of their ERP, built around a collaboration engine. So we have an RFQ module, a request for quote module, that allows for sourcing, pricing, lead time, all sourcing projects around different types of components and data that you need to capture from suppliers or from potential new suppliers in our platform, and then have all of that data easily in one place where you can then consolidate, cherry pick, and select the right suppliers for the right parts. That's kind of where the start of the data kind of begins. And getting that data back to your ERP so it can do its job around scheduling and planning and inventory optimization is critical. So we
Right.
are bi-directionally integrated from our platform. Once that sourcing, planning, lead time projects have all been accomplished, and you're continually doing them, hopefully over quarters and years, you now have purchase order demand that's getting created based off of lead times and demand fluctuations, inventory controls, min maxes, all of the typical sayings. What happens though is those purchase orders get created, they get put into a PO, PDF, or an Excel document, and they just get shot off into the ether
Yes.
to never be seen until they show up at the receiving dock, right? And if you have one receiving dock or thousands of receiving docks around the world, you, in some cases, don't know what's going to show up until it shows up. And
Whew.
that's ultimately planning to fail, right?
Right.
So our platform drives automated workflows so that a supplier can quickly and easily push updates and acknowledgments into the platform or do them in our platform itself. giving the buyer the ability to just look at what are the pieces and parts of a PO down to the line and the release level that are going to cause a problem. They're going to create a miss that I'm going to have to go manage. Rather than coming through Excel sheets and emails and faxes and voicemails and texts, you have all of those in a consolidated view and a dashboard that daily is driving automation to the supplier on managing those misses and those risks. All of that data and transaction that's happening is the best part is it's now in a consolidated collaborative view, and it's creating scorecards. So it's giving the
Nice.
buyers the ability to have an action based, behavioral based, objective scorecard for all of their suppliers globally that they can then use during QBRs, ISO audits, or just generally health of the business and knowing which suppliers are impacting them the most in a good or positive or a negative way. Our scorecards have quite often been used at the last minute before a surprise ISO audit to go ahead and compile and pull them together and say, here's how we're scoring our suppliers, and it's consistent across all of our suppliers by region. Um, Lastly is continually driving visibility to data and analytics. So giving executive dashboards and visibility to what are our lead times, how are they benchmarked against other organizations, price part variance issues that might be causing issues in our margins and our revenue targets, ability to hit on time in full and the impact that has on our revenue targets, and
Yeah.
what suppliers specifically down to a part are creating misses or issues that we can go focus in on to have better conversations with our partners. And then the last piece of our platform that's really more recently launched in the last 18 months is our accounts payable automation. And this is not just automating three-way matching. This is really giving controllers and accounts payable department users and the CFOs visibility to real-time liabilities
Hmm.
as receipts are being generated that match the purchase orders in our platform, inherently already matching the invoice because the buyers and the suppliers are already in such tight communication in real time. We're seeing as high as 95% first pass humanless touch match rate with a voucher
Wow.
into the ERP.
That's an
Pretty
amazing
incredible.
Yeah, that's an amazing percentage, and while you were talking, all I could think about was time back, time back, time back, right? Like, you think about the teams that you're hiring, and think about, if they have to manage all of these things, like you said, manually with spreadsheets and emails, that's what you're paying them to do is literally just manage paperwork because at the end of the day, they can't get to anything else because it just takes up so much time to do any of that.
Yeah, I'd like to add into that, right? And this goes back to what I said earlier is, the buyers, I believe, are truly the unsung heroes of an
Yes.
organization.
Mhm.
Nothing happens if parts don't show up, right?
True.
You can run machines longer, you can, tool lines differently to get more machines running on the same product or same project. You can add more staff, you can run more shifts, right? You can do all of these things, but if the parts aren't there,
Mhm.
you can't just start fabricating your own parts. I mean, in some
Yeah,
cases you could, but that at what cost, right? It's
exactly.
realistically the number one thing that you can control is between that gap of when a purchase order gets created and when it gets received, or at least put onto a mode of transport, right?
Yeah.
In that gap between there, I often kind of speak of with organizations around you've left basically a crater the size of the Grand Canyon in a process that is left to manual, complete lack of visibility, human effort that doesn't give you the ability to have accountability or visibility to where your misses are going to come from. And
Yeah.
that's where, giving these buyers a platform that helps them be more strategic and lifts up what you actually hired them to do, which is have better, tighter relationships with your trading partners, enables you to be a better organization to your customers.
It's so true, and that accounts payable. I mean, just thinking back to my time in logistics where I had to approve every single invoice and manually and not I mean, even with stamps. I mean, I'm going back to stamps that I had to stamp the actual invoice. You know what I mean? I mean, hopefully we're not doing that anymore, but I can see how valuable that accounts payable is too. And so you mentioned that you are compatible with any ERP. Well, when we talk about that, we think about integration, right? That's kind of where our mind goes. And so how does all that work? What does that integration and onboarding process look like? Is it cumbersome or is it pretty fast and easy, kind of like a plug and play?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, so for us, integration starts before we even sell a customer. right? You got to build success early on in this sales cycle and understand how a mutual successful platform is going to look, right?
Right.
Based on their workflows, their business model, who their suppliers are. So we do, a couple of very strategic calls throughout the sales cycle that are about, workflow, integration, processes, their ERP, any customizations they may have done in their ERP that we need to be at least
Aware of.
known of,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so that's really the initial piece of it, and it's really happening, unbeknownst to the buyer, that we're going through this as a part of our pre-planning to make sure we have a successful deployment. Because if we can't integrate to the customer's ERP, we've already failed, right? So
Right.
we make sure we kick that off in the beginning. So integrations, are part of our core. We've built the platform from day one to be ERP agnostic. We've used a series of home-built APIs and solutions that work with both, on-premise ERP systems, homegrown ERP systems in some cases,
Oh, wow.
uh, cloud-based, single instance, multi-tenant, et cetera. So we've integrated to over 20 different ERP types and probably many dozens more than that in if you're looking at actual versions of ERPs, both on-prem and in the cloud. So the integration process typically takes anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depending on
Okay.
the depth of the integration or the enterprise level of that application. And we do most of the heavy lifting from our deployment team. And in some cases, we may bring on a partner that the customer may work with that they're more comfortable with to help do the last mile of integration on their side.
Right. So it sounds like it's pretty quick, right? Pretty easy and not a lot of requirements from the buyer themselves, which I love and I'm sure most of our audience is going to love too. And so but you work with both buyers and suppliers, and your supplier offering, which you call a suppliers collaboration tool, is free. So what's the thinking behind that model? Do you find that suppliers are sometimes out of the loop and this is an effective way to pull them in and get them really embracing data sharing, visibility, and even that greater collaboration? What was the thinking behind that?
That since day one, Clinton and I sought out to say we're never going to charge a supplier to use the SourceDay platform from a collaboration standpoint. And today we've not charged a single supplier for any use of the SourceDay platform. The thought behind that is our customers are mainly primarily the buying organization, right? The ones that are trying to get parts in on time so that they can meet their customer goals and hit revenue targets. Just as equally, though, when it comes to building a product and the platform and the user interface and success of onboarding and adoption, our supplier users, our customer suppliers, are also a customer in our eyes. They don't pay us to be a customer, but without their success and without their adoption, we don't have a successful customer relationship. So the bulk of our users, in addition, are also supplier users by
Mm,
almost 10x. So we
wow.
have been from day one heavily focused on a supplier centric product development roadmap, a little bit contrary to the portals of the 90s and the early 2000s that really struggled to get off the ground because they were built with just the buyer in mind, and they didn't have any concept of how we're going to make the supplier successful or what is the value to the supplier. So
Right.
um, we'll continue to be free for suppliers. There's data enriching aspects and other things down the road where we might offer some paid additions and some modules that will give suppliers even greater data than they can get access to today.
Hmm.
We've also integrated to some suppliers in some cases where we have a high transaction volume or a large trading partner like a distributor, electronics components,
Yeah.
which continues to be a very strategic offering for us to go and get more of our customers' needs met in an automated way from those large volume suppliers that they're cutting purchase orders with. So again, it's been a strategy from day one. Suppliers are a critical piece of our ecosystem.
Yeah.
We have a large growing base of suppliers. We're onboarding hundreds, sometimes thousands a week, and it continues to be a big piece of our business.
Amazing. And I love to hear that. And that's really the success mindset, right? Because you're not just focusing on your paid customer, you're focusing on the full ecosystem and what that means for your paid customer. And so I know that, I talked about COVID a little bit earlier on, and There was so many disruptions, right? There has been, there still is, like late shipments, missed emails, miscommunications. And from what I've seen in your research, it causes 50% of direct spend PO lines to change. And that's a high number, which I want to talk about because it makes me cringe even just to think about all that wasted time. But in times of major disruption, that number, I would imagine, gets even higher, right? And a major disruption like COVID has got to have sent those numbers skyrocketing. So, what have you guys been seeing at SourceDay? What's the experience like for your customers? Because I imagine SourceDay, like I said earlier, has really been able to come to the rescue.
It really has, right? The data we have is incredible. In Q1, we're going to be launching some exciting insights and analytics to the data in aggregate. It's going to show some pretty incredible components. That one of which I'm going to speak to here, which is, you know, COVID and through the tragedy that was, we saw change or the rate of change for purchase orders climb to almost 65% of all purchase order
Wow,
lines experienced at least one component of change, meaning
crazy.
it was either a demand side change, meaning they were doing a push out or a pull in or a cancellation or just a revision to the purchase order, all the way to a supplier who is constantly going to have change on their side, even more so during COVID. And again, all of that change represents disruption that if it doesn't get captured, approved by both parties, buyer and supplier, and then automatically updated into the ERP system in some way or another, that change is all but obsolete, right? You don't know about it until it's too late, and that impact is going to impact your customers almost immediately. So we're able to capture that change for those customers at that alarming rate that it was, and give them the ability to just manage those pieces of a PO line down to the release, whether it was a date or a quantity or a new part revision or a price. They're able to see those changes, bubble those up, collaborate on them, and then update the ERP with the true and final purchase order values. That enables the ERP, the
Amazing.
MRP, the planning engine to do what it needs to do so that you can actually effectively hit your customers' targets. That data and that change rate has normalized now down back into the 52%
Yeah.
range, according to
Okay.
our data over the last couple of quarters, which is still an alarming rate of change, right? Over half of your purchase orders are still inaccurate all the time.
Absolutely. And so what's the impact that the last 18 months have had on your clients, especially when it comes to mindset, technology, supply chain transformation, because I'm hearing that key areas like visibility, collaboration and a commitment to better data have all really been accelerated, right? I feel like we've been talking about collaboration and visibility all throughout this pandemic. So what kind of impact are you seeing?
Yeah, collaboration and visibility have become kind of token words in the supply chain space. And what I think is most exciting and most interesting for us is we've been doing this, going on 7 years now, and it's taken a lot of education for most of the mid market. The enterprises were already trying to chase this through, a lot of home built tools and other
Right.
solutions, but this, tragic, pandemic has bubbled, these phrases and these terms and this dialogue to the boardroom level. They're now
Mhm.
trying to figure out how can we, digitize and transform our supply chain practices so that we can be prepared for, whatever the next tragedy might be. Hopefully there isn't one, but you've got to be prepared and you've got to plan. And again, the unsung heroes of the buying organization have been left to live through manual processes and Excel and
Right.
email, and without something in place, these types of unfortunate events are going to leave you at risk of continual misses to your customer base and potentially losing customers to competitors for life.
Yeah, and it's overdue. They need something to be able to get that time back so that they can really strategize, which is going to benefit all organizations and all supply chains. So I want to ask you who your ideal customer is. Do you have one? Is there a size or a company ethos that you look for in an ideal customer for SourceDay?
Yeah, we like all customers that have supply chain issues. I feel like we can help just about any customer that has supplier misses, and if their on time and full rates are low. But if you narrow it down, right, any organization in sort of the 30 million on the lower end in revenue, upwards of 3 to 5 billion in revenue is where we've seen some of the majority of our growth. We have customers in the Fortune 50 that are using SourceDay globally for their supply chain collaboration, and
Amazing.
we've been able to pull dozens of sites of very enterprise ERP rollouts into a single consolidated view of SourceDay so they can see all of their spend, all of their supplier
Wow.
collaboration and performance across, in some cases, 20, 30 ERPs down into one view. So
Huh.
that's been an incredible piece, right? So we have high scalability into the big enterprise. To your question, our core ICP, if we're really talking about our true sweet spot, is our typical customer is between 100 and 400 million in revenue. They're running some sort of an ERP system that's doing planning and scheduling for them.
Hmm.
Again, we've integrated with over 20 ERPs today. And they've got discrete manufacturing, or they're a direct to consumer retailer or a distribution company.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. Because if I'm sitting in the audience and I'm like, I really need to pick up the phone and call SourceDay, I need to know what that looks like. And I think that was great. And then, you know, now we're on to the part where we talk about your case study because I love this part. And I know our listeners and our audience love this as well because you also have some fabulous case studies and testimonials on your website. I think someone said SourceDay paid for itself after only 3 months. So why don't you share with us your best or maybe favorite customer example? What was their challenge that they came to you with? What was the solution? And then what was the impact of that solution to their business?
Yeah, there's some great case studies that come to mind, right? And there's many of them in webinars and tutorials and white papers on our website, but they all sound pretty similar when we speak to them. And it's almost always a case of a supplier miss creating a customer miss. And it's not typically just one miss. It happens repeatedly over time, and the misses sometimes get bigger and have a greater impact. And in some cases, we had one customer that was continually missing, quarterly targets, by millions of dollars. And this was, for about a $300 million organization, some cases tens of millions of dollars in misses, and it was
Wow.
all coming down to a single, couple of supplier key misses that were continually, repeatedly happening. And those misses drove about all the way up to the CIO and the head of operations a conversation about, hey, we need to go solve this problem. We need to go find a solution that's going to drive collaboration. An EDI is a great way to do that with your large suppliers, and you can accomplish some of that data visibility with large suppliers through EDI, but you leave about 80 to 90% of your spend unmanaged when you use just EDI. So this organization found SourceDay. We were able to implement them in under 30 days, and we were able to get them to pay for themselves within 3 months through
Woo!
protecting their revenue. They no longer had to expedite freight. This organization was actually chartering airplanes at the last minute to get supplier parts to their facility so they didn't have to shut the line down. And
Wow.
they in many cases, right, if you're in the automotive industry, the fees and penalties for having your customers' lines go down get into the tens of thousands per hour and sometimes per minute. So very big cost savings for them just in risk mitigation and guaranteeing that they're giving their customer the best experience with the parts on time.
Amazing. I love that story. And you're saying that it comes from, it's a similar story across all of your customers. So I can assure you that there are people in this audience that are having those challenges. And so they are going to pick up the phone and give you a call. So finally, then, I want to know what the future holds. What does the future hold for SourceDay? What's next for you guys?
A lot to come. I mentioned earlier, teased a little bit about, some insights and analytics and some very exciting
Tell us
data
more.
components that we're going to have come out in Q1. Some more to come on that, but I think one of the most exciting things about SourceDay is we're going to continue to grow our ecosystem through our partners. We have great partnerships with NetSuite and Coupa and many others, and we're going to continue to scale through those partnership strategies and organizations, and drive more product feature enhancements through that as well. One of the most exciting pieces that we're working on today that I can speak about is, again, the analytics and the predictability of the data we have. So we're getting into a place now where we're starting to beta test the ability to have predictable on-time delivery through the collaborative data that's going on our platform over many years, down to a supplier's ability to hit a customer's on-time delivery of a component that's on a current live purchase order. So pieces and components
Wow.
to that level of granularity, being able to tell a customer that this has an 80% confidence of being on time or a 20% confidence of being on time gives them the ability to go see where they need to spend their time strategically to make sure customers' needs are met on time.
Amazing. Well, I am definitely going to follow you. I can't wait to see what is next and to get some more information on what you're talking about here. And I really enjoyed that. I mean, you and the team at SourceDay really are a brand after my own heart. And, I know from my own experience, it's not easy, right? Getting buy in, integrating systems. And I think what you're doing at SourceDay is clearly really effective. I mean, it's really making a difference and it's a model we can all learn a lot from. And when you're looking to optimize your teams and make strides in making these jobs easier, quicker, and just making them more fun. I mean, supply chain is an amazing industry to be in, and it's companies like yours at SourceDay that are making it fun to be here, and I love that. So, a big thanks to you, Tom, for joining me today. Thank you to the team for making this happen, and thanks for coming on and telling us all about SourceDay.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciate what you do and appreciate your time today.